Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Mares FM. I didn't think it would be this long before we'd be back, but other people seem to have thought otherwise. But here I am because I have nothing else better to do with my life before school starts. So, first of all, I was thinking with this show, I kind of want to refrain back from going for the past, present, and future, despite of the football events, despite that being the title of the show. I think what would be more appropriate for me, mainly because it's less work, but will be something like if I focus on a singular issue that I find interesting every week. Because realistically, right, I don't really care about. I don't really care about a lot of the stuff I talk about on this show. Like I have no interest in lower league Getafe beating this team, blah blah. You know what I mean. So I'm just going to talk about the stuff I'm interested in the world of football. And this week, what I'm going to cover is the major news that happened during the week that your man Thomas Tuchel has arrived in England as the Chelsea manager. And essentially, in this show, I'm going to tell you what we should expect. Now, I'm going to be blatantly ripping this off an article which I've found, but I should clarify that none of you can access it unless you're willing to pay $2.99 a month, which, while it is a decent price, I'm just going to make it more convenient for you by telling you what is in the article. So, it's an Athletic article. I'll just scroll to the top. It's an Athletic article by authors, by Michael Cox and Tom Warville. And they're just essentially going through like what Chelsea can expect from Thomas Tuchel, right? So I guess the first thing that they think about, right, is obviously he's had a very similar trajectory to the likes of Klopp, right? So they both started at Mainz a long time ago, while it was very different times, and then Tuchel succeeded Klopp at Dortmund, and obviously, at Dortmund they'd be accustomed to Klopp's like quote heavy metal football, high pressing, gegen pressing, wearing team, intense pressing essentially. But this is not, while this may be the stigma attached to Tuchel, this isn't necessarily the case. So he focused on controlling the game through reliable midfield positioning and purposeful passing. So essentially, he used midfielders. And the main one that he was Julian Weigl, who some people might remember as a FIFA wonder kid, but obviously I think he's at Benfica now. Obviously, he was phased out by the likes of Favre and others. But certainly when Tuchel was in charge, he absolutely adored him. And his midfield would have been made up of Raf Guerrero, who most people would consider as a left back, and Gonzalo Castro, who became a defender, who became a very good midfielder in terms of building up play. And at PSG, we should remember that he worked with Marco Verratti, who was essentially the same as what Julian Weigl was. And, under Tuchel, he arguably became one of what Tuchel called the best midfielder in the world. And I guess you could kind of consider this with Chelsea as well. And in terms of, you can draw comparisons with Chelsea in terms of Jorginho would be the most likely out of the midfielders between him and Kante to be like Verratti and Weigl. And also, a lot of people don't forget that one of Tuchel's biggest influences was Pep Guardiola. So, if you have a look at his stats, in terms of the how much they've used the ball, a lot of while they're not as high as Guardiola, Tuchel during his time has involved a lot of attacks which have comprised of like 10 or more passes. So he's not a very direct manager, right? But while he isn't as high as Guardiola, he's certainly certainly close to his level. And then another thing that should definitely be noted is he's very much a flexible manager, so he doesn't stick with one particular formation. Rather, he sticks with loads of them. He kind of goes between loads of different formations in order to counter the threats of whatever the opposition is. So the top 5 formations that he used at Dortmund from his time when he started the job in 2015 to 2017 were as follows. So the top 5 were the 4-3-2 or 4-2-3-1, which he used for 24 games, the 4-1-4-1, which he used for 15 games, the 3-4-3, 13, 4-3-3, he used it for 6 games, and the 3-1-4-2 he used for 5. And this can also be demonstrated at PSG, although we can see that he mainly focused on the 4-3-3, but which he played 26 games. The 4-4-2, 14, 4-2-2, which is essentially a 4-4-2, but the wingers are higher up. Used that for 10 games. 4-2-3-1 for 8 games, and the 3-5-2 for 7 games. And as I've already said, 4-3-3 was the most common formation at PSG. And in those 26 games they used the 4-3-3, he used 21 different midfield trios. The most common being Idrissa Gueye, the Aston Villa flop, and also very good at Everton, and the Herrera and Marco Verratti. And yes, that's probably the main effect there. And that's definitely something that a lot of Chelsea fans, who I know, should expect. A lot of tactical flexibility depending on the opposition. And then another question has kind of come up as well, because obviously, not obviously because you just don't know, but at the start of his career, his Mainz team were actually more like Klopp, and they used very high pressing, and they actually did quite well. But it's interesting to note, during this very physically demanding campaign for everyone, pressing has dropped off significantly from last year. And it also should be noted that Tuchel's Dortmund sides weren't as aggressive when it comes to pressing. And the number of high turnovers per game, they dipped from 7 to 6.2, which, went from 4 to 7. However, at PSG, he did manage to instill a more aggressive and consistent press. But, given the fact that they won the league every year, this isn't very shocking. So it was quite easy to implement. And also, the final thing, not the final thing, but another thing that we should focus on is the emphasis on overlapping fullbacks, right? So overlapping essentially is just you have your fullback. It's essentially how Liverpool conduct themselves now, with Robertson and Trent Alexander-Arnold going up really high up the pitch and crossing. Essentially, that's what it is. And then essentially, essentially, sorry, I'll just compose my thoughts for 1 second. So at Dortmund, he didn't really lack truly dynamic players who would who would be prime for these overlapping options. So he had Marcel Schmelzer and Lucas Piszczek. But at PSG, there was a high amount of overlapping with Thomas Meunier, now at Dortmund coincidentally, and Juan Bernat, who would often take up extremely advanced positions to collect balls taken that were played over the top of the opposition defence. That would be a main thing. And obviously, we have to think about how this would work at Chelsea. So we would have the likes of Reece James and Ben Chilwell, who would be prime for that position. And, James is, it has to be emphasised that Reece James is really good at crossing. And Chilwell is quite good at popping up at the far post. And also another guy who could possibly pop back into the frame as well that we can't forget is Marcos Alonso, because during a similar time with Antonio Conte, he did really well with that wing-back position. However, it's probably less likely that that Azpilicueta is going to feature now due to his age and his lack of dynamism. But certainly, certainly there's a lot of full-back attacking options that Chelsea can certainly consider. And then the next one that we have to look at is how he's managed his squad. So he tends to prefer shuffling, rarely having a core of players that he'll like. Essentially, he likes to rotate quite a lot. And perhaps during the best example of this is during his Dortmund season in 2015-16. So the only ever present during that season was Roman Bürki, the goalkeeper, who's still there. And yeah, that was the main thing there. And during times at PSG, it got a little more hectic. He played at least 30 players in each of his seasons at the club. And the only notable regular was Angel Di Maria in 2019-20. And that focus on youth is something that should really be focused on. And the only players at PSG that were used throughout were the likes of Dani Alves during that season that he played, Edison Cavani, and Thiago Silva, all also very good players. So that should be something to note. And the makeup of the current Chelsea squad fits Tuchel perfectly in terms of being fairly young, and it's quite deep in terms of the squad. So they were the sixth youngest team in the Premier League with an average age of 26. And in terms of rotation, they had 8 players featuring in between 50 and 80% of the total games, behind only West Brom with 9. And in terms of changes, Billy Gilmore, obviously a great prospect, and Callum Hudson-Odoi may be granted more minutes in the league, and perhaps Alonso could feature more too, as we've already said. And then, obviously, the main thing that everyone says he was brought in for was to improve Werner and Havertz. It shouldn't be forgotten that during his time at PSG and Dortmund, Kylian Mbappe and Aubameyang had the best scoring seasons of their career under his guidance. Both are blessed with the pace to threaten on the break, but also have a good nose to know where the ball might drop, allowing both of them to score a lot of easy goals. So essentially, during that campaign, under Tuchel, Aubameyang scored 25 and 31 league goals, the latter being a record for most goals in the Bundesliga season until Robert Lewandowski's 34 in 2019-20 season. And then Mbappe scored 33 in 2018-19 and in the 2019-20 season. And essentially, he's been able to get the most out of his strikers. So, essentially, Werner has definitely the potential to become one of the next in the line of the great strikers being under the tutelage of Tuchel, and this is certainly encouraging for Chelsea fans. And then Havertz's role is less obvious, mainly because he's been used as a number 8, like the wide amount of positions that he's been used under Frank, who's been trying to find his best position. So he's been used as a number 8, a number 10, a false 9, and from wide as well. So it's not difficult to imagine Tuchel deploying him on the right, which is kind of like the role Mkhitaryan played when Tuchel was at Dortmund. But essentially, Hakim Ziyech seems a more obvious fit for the right spot, considering his good relationship with James on the overlap and his ability to cut inside and shoot with his left foot. So, which leaves him to be deployed as number 8, where he didn't really look that comfortable in the centre midfield. And, however, I guess one thing that a lot of players are complaining about under Lampard was that they weren't getting a lot of individual instructions. And definitely, this is not going to be the case under Tuchel. He's very specific. And he's very specific and will hopefully help the players grow as a result. And obviously, despite his tumultuous relationship with tumultuous relationship with previous regimes at other clubs, it cannot be argued that he definitely has quite the ability to improve players. Something which, it's kind of hard to judge Frank on that sort of stuff because he's been only in for 2 seasons. But definitely, it's not something that Chelsea fans should worry about, because, a lot of Chelsea fans would worry about the fact that, because Lampard is not here, we're not going to be getting loads of young players in. But as I've hopefully demonstrated, that's not going to be the case with Tuchel, as, he likes to rotate his squad and he likes to put an emphasis on youth. And in his press conference, he spoke of his delight about the number of young, talented players here. And hopefully, as a result of his good relationship at other clubs, we'll see the likes of definitely Werner firing. And yeah, it's hopefully his time at Chelsea will be a success. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this episode of the Tuchel Special. Apologies if I sound a bit rusty. I haven't done this in 3 weeks, so apologies if I'm a bit rusty. But yeah, if you have any comments, please leave them down in the comments below. And please make sure to subscribe to the Mars FM YouTube channel, where we'll have a load of shows, including... I'm not even going to try and remember all of them, but there's a lot of shows that are certainly more entertaining than this one. And you never know. If you don't like this show, there's certainly more other shows that will help you satisfy any free time that you have. Okay, that's it, everyone. I'll see you all next week. That's me. I'm out.